let us begin our ranking of the top 10 greatest female MMA fighters of all time.
So I just want to say one thing real fast. So we have agreed here, this is an open weight ranking, as Mike alluded to, but we have agreed to exclude atomweight. So if you're listening and you have some atomweight favorite that you're hoping to hear, you're not going to hear it. We're going to use the weight classes that have existed within the UFC. We're not only going to consider the UFC, but those are the weight classes we're going to use, 115 through 145. And I don't think there has ever been a unanimously agreed upon top 10 ranking of anything in the history of life. So I know some of you guys are going to disagree with what you hear today. So get in the comments. We want to hear the takes. We want to hear why you disagree or why you like something that someone chose to do. We want to have the engagement. So comment your takes for sure as you're listening to this.
Yeah. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go up our rankings. So we're going to end with our number one pick. So we're going to split it up, first 5 and second 5. So we're going to start with our rankings 10 through 6, and then we'll probably talk and be shocked with one another. And then we'll do rankings 5 through 1. Who would like to go first?
So we're going to start with some honorable mentions, though.
Okay. Sure.
So,
well, whoever goes first, before you get into number 10, do your honorable mentions.
Well, we can make them a little. We'll take a pause after the three of us after the honorable mentions. I think.
Oh, okay.
That's what we had said.
Let's do it.
All right. Who wants to start this thing off?
I'll do some honorable mentions.
Okay. Go for it.
So my first honorable mention is Megumi Fuji. I couldn't put her in my top 10 because I don't think she's ever really won a championship of any kind that matters. I think the one time that she had the opportunity to win a belt, she lost. She's only lost 3 times in her career. Really good record, has beaten some really good names, finished some good names. So I had her in my honorable mentions, but again, she never really wore gold, so I was hard pressed to put her in a top 10 list. Next is Gina Carano, another person with kind of a crazy record when you really look at it. The reality is she hit a wall called Chris Cyborg and she was done. And I don't really blame her. I don't think her skills would have translated into the modern day mixed martial arts world that women have evolved the game into. But at the heyday of her arrival, Gina Carano was that chick, and she was good, and she was vicious. Next on my list, Jessica Andrade. This was just because of where my top 10 list ended up, but the fact is Jessica Andrade could be argued in a top 10 list if you really wanted to. I would not dispute that at all. She just didn't make mine. Carla Esparza is my last honorable mention. Another one that has worn gold in multiple organizations, but she has had some losses, and her performances, I thought, should also speak a little bit for her placement. And some of her performances have left us lacking, I would imagine. So those are my 4 honorable mentions.
Okay, I have 3 honorable mentions. The first one,
Well done, Amar. I liked those.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I almost said thank you as well. That's weird. I'm off to maybe I should stop drinking whiskey now. My first honorable mention is also Gina Carano. I can sort of sum up Gina Carano by saying she was kind of Ronda before Ronda. She was kind of like this breakout star in women's MMA before, but kind of like a little too early, I want to say. She was a striker who had this great skill set, and she kind of also had these kind of Hollywood leading lady looks. Like, she was really beautiful, and she has worked in film since her fighting career. So yeah, maybe she peaked a little bit too early, and like Omar alluded to, she ran into a brick wall named Chris Cyborg, who we will definitely hear from later. Second person on my honorable mentions list is Jessica Andrade, someone who has held UFC gold. She has quite a few names on her win column of her record. Not enough of any kind of a run. to really justify her to go up into my ranking. She held the belt, I believe, once. She lost it immediately. She never defended a belt, but she has a great record, 24-9 as a record with 71% finish rate. She went 1-1 with Rose Namajunas, and she fought for belts a few other times. So that's why Andrade is knocking at the door of my top 10. And my last person for my honorable mentions is Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison, as dominant as she is, and as much of a star as she is right now, I kept knocking her down my list until I was like, I think she's kind of my number 11. Simply because not only has she not beaten anyone else among these all-time rankings, she hasn't fought anyone else in these all-time rankings. So for that reason alone, even though she has a fantastic 15-1 record, a 94% finish rate, she is the reigning PFL lightweight champion. What holds her back is, I believe, her lack of competition among these other greats.
She is not reigning.
Oh, not anymore.
Larissa
Well,
Pacheco
exactly.
is on the scene
that
now.
too. Thank you for the correction. Okay, Mark, you go.
All right. I too have 4 honorable mentions, and none of them have been said yet, which is interesting. I feel like mine might be controversial, but I'm gonna rattle off like a dozen names real fast, just a list of women who I feel like deserve shout outs that I felt like were next level that I could not consider.
Totally.
Are these your honorable mentions?
Yes.
Jesus,
It's literally just a
Christ.
list. I'm not going to say anything about them. But I just feel like we're doing the entire women of MMA. I want to give some love to a few other women who are
Spread the love.
kind of just next level.
You do it.
Yuka Tsuji, who was known as the Queen of Valley Tudo. Tara LaRosa, who was a pioneer. Jermaine Durandamy, Julia Budd, Liz Carmouche, Barb Honchak, Claudia Gadelia, Jessica Aguilar, Alexis Davis, Juliana Pena now, Kat Zingano.
Okay.
So, wanted to... Oh, and I skipped Raquel Pennington. I actually included her there as well. So, wanted to just give them a quick little bit of love. But into my 4 honorable mentions, who were the ones I really debated having a chance to crack my top 10. And like I said, I think we're going to get controversial for you guys right off the bat. Holly Holm.
Okay.
Holly Holm was responsible for one of the all-time greatest moments and greatest accomplishments in the history of women's MMA and MMA period. But her record against opponents in what I would call the upper level of women's MMA is like 5-6, maybe 6-6 if you want to push it. She only has the one finish, which is the finish. So I just didn't feel like the overall career resume, despite the obviously huge legendary moment, was enough for me to include her in my top 10 over the girls that I have in there. So she missed. The next one who missed, Miesha Tate.
Okay.
Miesha Tate fell into a very similar boat for me to Holly Holm. Obviously, she's much more of a trailblazer in women's MMA, but she was kind of up and down throughout her career, and she's very similar to Holly in that her resume is powered by one big win, which is when she choked out Holly for the title. That aside, yes, she beat Marlis Kunin, who was kind of reaching the end of her dominance at that point in time. And, of course, she's got some other solid wins. Like, I easily have her as a top 15 women's fighter ever. I'm not trying to knock her.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't land her in the top 10 over the girls that I ended up going with.
Okay.
2 left. This one was kind of my surprising one to myself. Sarah Kaufman. Obviously, I'm aware of Sarah Kaufman. I've watched her fight plenty of times. My brain hadn't considered her at this level. And then when I was kind of going through resumes, I was like, wow, this might be one of the most underappreciated OGs in women's MMA. She's 22-5. Her losses are to Pacheco at the end of her career, who's way bigger than her, Valentina, Ronda, Marlis Kunin, and the one slight outlier, Alexis Davis, but it's a trilogy, and she beat Alexis Davis the other 2 times. So that's a pretty damn good list of your only losses. Other than those, she turned back 22 women. She beat Leslie Smith twice. She beat Alexis Davis twice, as I said. She beat Carmouche. She beat Roxy in her prime. She beat Valerie Letourneau. She beat Miesha Tate. So her resume stacks up big time, and I wanted to make sure she got a shout out here, but she couldn't crack my 10. And the last one, who I imagine we may hear from you guys coming up, she didn't crack mine, is Kunin. She is one of the first greats of women's MMA. She was the name for a bit there. And I have her just missing my top 10. And it's for a couple of reasons. You try not to factor in quality of competition hugely at that point in time, but I feel like you also can't ignore it entirely. And for a bit there, her quality of competition, I would say, was not the best. And she does have a couple losses mixed in there that were kind of to lesser women. So I flip-flopped if I wanted her as my number 10 for a while. She has 20 finishes and 23 fights, which is a big factor for me. So I almost pulled the trigger, but she finished just outside my top 10.
Okay. Do you want to just kind of round robin it and go right into your 10 through 6?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. All right, here we go. My number 10, Carla Esparza. Another one that was a surprise to me. If you asked me, a week ago when you said, let's put this together, never thought Carla Esparza would be in my top 10. And then when I looked at it, I was like, fuck, I think I got to include her. So she is a 2-time champion, obviously. I don't love her finish rate, which, again, is what almost had me flipping her and Kunin. But there were a lot of checks in Carla's corner that I could not ignore. She is a 2-time UFC champion. She won the tough tourney, which was a legit high-level tourney. It was the best woman in the world at that weight class at that point in time.
That's true.
She has beaten a girl I have higher on this list in Rose twice, even if one of those fights sucked. And on top of that, her record is 10-7 against what I'd call top-level competition. But 3 of those losses are razor-close, arguable split decisions. So that record could easily be like 13-4 if you wanted to give her all those. 12-5, however you want to play with it. It's a pretty damn good record. She's really only lost, definitively, about 4 times. And the only girls to do that to her, to definitively beat her, were Megumi Fuji, Joanna, Wei Li. 3 legends. And then one who could have been a legend and maybe who still will be, who knows, in Tatiana Suarez. So for those to be the only girls who have bested you, and you're a 2-time UFC champion, and you've got wins over Herrig, Moroz, Calvillo, Jandaroba, Grasso, Waterson, Rodriguez, Jan, and Rose twice, I couldn't leave her off the list. So I snuck Carla in as my number 10. All right, number 9. Only a 1-time champion, Jessica Andrade. I thought this was going to be a controversial inclusion, but you guys both shouted her out in your honorables, so I guess it's not as crazy as I imagined.
She's your number 9. It's not like she's in your top 5.
Yeah, I didn't know she would even get the honorable love, so I was happy to hear that. Mainly for me, it was driven by her success over multiple weight classes and her finishes. In the UFC alone, she has finished Pacheco, Joanne Wood, Kovalevich, Rose, Chukagian, Calvillo, Lemos. That is a crazy list of finishes
a lot of bodies.
in women's MMA.
Yep.
And that's just finished. She's also beat Raquel, Angela Hill, Gedalia, Tisha, Lauren Murphy, and others. She's got her list of quality victories is endless. And she has these wins and finishes across 3 different weight classes, including one that she didn't belong in 135, but for a while it was her only option. And yes, she's lost 7 times in the UFC, but 3 of those were when she was stuck at 135, where she didn't belong. So those aside, she's lost to Joanna, Wei Li, Rose, who she also beat, and Shevchenko. I mean, you can't have a more respectable list than that. So I got to give Jessica Andrade the flowers that I think she deserves.
Okay.
All right. Up to number 8. This is where this list got a lot easier. It was a debate what I wanted to do with 9 and 10.
With you.
I'm into a kind of trio here going forward from this point.
Okay.
My number 8 is Zhang Weili. I absolutely believe that she already deserves to be ranked this highly. Of course, she's not even done yet. She could be higher. She's already a 2-time champion. We'll see if she's able to defend it. Neither girl I've listed so far, Carla or Jessica, was able to do that. We'll see if Weili can. But she has finished Esparza. She's finished Andrade. She's finished Joanna, who she's beaten twice. Granted, one of them was a legendary war. And after a loss she took in her professional debut, she has then gone 25 fights, only losing to one single person, that being Rose Namajunas. Not to mention she has 19 finishes in those 23 wins. So you could argue that she could even slot in above Joanna, considering she's beaten her twice. I didn't go that route, and I'll explain why, but I think Weili is a strong number 8, in my opinion, on this list.
Nice.
Which leads me to Joanna. She is my number 7. A lot lower, I think, than my brain initially thought. Not a lot lower, but I think in my head going into this, I was like, she's probably number 5.
Okay.
Ended up with her at 7. It's odd to have a woman who is often called like the woman's GOAT for a period of time, all the way down at number 7, but I think it's a fair spot once I really looked at it. As great as she was, her record against other women in my top 10 was 2-5. She lost to Rose twice, who I ended up having to rank above her. She lost to Weili twice. But the reason I have her ahead of Weili is because of her championship run. It was legendary. I think you have to take into account the number of title fight victories, which was 6 for Joanna, and it was 6 in a row. She took the title from Carla. She beat Penne, Latorno, Gadelia, Kovacevic, Andrade consecutively. Simply for that stretch, that run, I had to put her at least ahead of Weili. Outside of that run, either direction, before or after, there's not a lot to hang your hat on for Joanna's career. It kind of was that run. But I think that's enough to have her at my number 7 spot. And then number 6 is Rose. Like I said, I viewed these three as kind of like a trio. I had to figure out how I wanted to stack them up. But it's Rose for me. I couldn't justify ranking Rose behind either of those girls when her record against them is 4-0. Like, yes, she's lost twice to Carla, but one was a non-fight, and the other was when Rose was still pretty raw. Yes, there's not like a ton else on Rose's resume necessarily. She has the 1-on-1 series with Jessica Andrade, of course. She's 1-on-1 with Tisha. But simply on the back of 4 title fight victories with a 4-0 record over Joanna and Weili and a finish over each one of them, I couldn't put her any lower than 6. So Rose Namajunas is my number 6.
Okay. Omar, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
I can go.
Do it up, baby.
My number 10 is Holly Holm. She just scratched in there. I think a lot of what Mark talked about in his honorable mentions, I think kind of goes to why, for me, she's in the top 10. She did grab gold. Her impact in that moment was, I mean, it literally changed MMA at that point, right? As much as Ronda had changed MMA at that point for women, like Holly Holm opened the door for women to now start to spread and win and change hands in titles and so forth and so on. Ronda wasn't that monster anymore and left the game and allowed other people to kind of melt their way in. I think the impact was too severe not to include her in that situation. I do have her low on the list because she never defended her belt. And even though she does not have the most consistent win record since that point, she fights literally only the best. And it's, she has a lot of these tight decisions, which frankly, some of those losses could have been wins. Like the Ketlin Vieira loss, for example. I don't think she lost that fight. But that's the Holly Holm career. But I do think that when it comes to the greatest women of all time, in the MMA world, I think she definitely is on that list. Very low on the list, but there. My number 9 is Marlos Kunin. Again, for kind of the similar reasons as far as impact is concerned, the way she fought. I don't want to give her shit for the level of competition because that was the time. If a lot of these girls had come in a lot earlier, like Chris Cyborg has been around for forever and she's been killing people for forever. And so that's why she's not number 9 and she's a lot higher. But Marlos Kunin was a beast in her day. She definitely had some weird outliers as far as people who beat her in random promotions and things like that. But she won a belt. She won a belt when UFC winning a belt was not a thing. And she defended that belt once, but still defended that belt. And then the Miesha Tate thing happened, and then we go from there. But her jiu-jitsu was definitely amongst the earliest in the game that was elite. It made her the equalizer in a lot of her fights. But she wasn't the type of woman who, like Chris Cyborg, was a specimen. This was a normal ass woman who knew really good jiu-jitsu. And sometimes she got fucked up. And sometimes, a lot of the time, she was choking people or taking a limb. But I loved watching her fight, man. She was one of my earliest memories of MMA. Was watching Marloes Coenen win and watching Miesha Tate beat her for the first time and really understanding what that meant at the time. So, number 9, Marloes Coenen. With that, number 8 comes Miesha Tate. I think her impact, especially in that specific run where she ended up fighting Marloes Coenen for the belt, she was literally the underdog in every fight. No one, I think, had her winning anything in that fight. I think it was actually reminiscent of how they kind of checked out Daniel Cormier when he first came onto the scene in the Strikeforce, in that Strikeforce heavyweight tournament where no one had heard of this guy, no one knew what he was, and here he comes in just wrecking everybody. And Miesha Tate was kind of doing that with the girls that were fighting for this Bellator tournament or Strikeforce tournament. And when she got to Marloes Coenen, no one really thought she had a chance. Marloes Coenen was Marloes Coenen. And here she goes, and she wins the belt. She walks away with some gold. And then we get to her UFC career, can't get past Ronda Rousey on multiple occasions, but was able to win a belt off of Holly Holm in dramatic fashion. And again, another impactful moment, especially with it being UFC 200 and so on and so forth. But Miesha Tate is such a large impact. Her actual fights themselves, I think, are absolutely tenacious. The one thing you can never say about Miesha Tate is she doesn't come to fight. And I think for me, I was hard pressed not to have her in my top 10 because anytime I think of women's MMA, Miesha Tate is one of the names on my list. My number 7 was Zhang Wei Li. I like what you said, Mark, about Zhang Wei Li not being done and that there's room for improvement. I looked at my list and I was pretty sure nobody there was probably going to go up or down for the most part. Maybe the top 2 or 3, depending on how things end up moving around. But I think Zhang Wei Li is the one out of everybody on my list that has the potential to be completely different in a year or two, depending on what she does with her career. But as of right now, the accomplishments that she's had in the short time that she's been around, I think are significant. She's had her losses. She's had her redemptions. And I'm more interested to see how far up she climbs from a number 7 spot in the future. But as of right now, that's where I have her. And my number 6 is Joanna Champion. It is hard not to recognize that run because that was, to me, like a female Conor McGregor run.
Yeah.
That was some of the most fun I think I've ever had in the women's division. Watching her face-offs, watching her talk shit with her accent is absolutely hilarious. And then she beat the shit out of these girls. These were not close fights. She beat the shit out of every single one of those girls up until she won that belt. And then, eventually we get to the Rose thing and, and things started to change again. But the run that Joanna had at that point was so significant. Another set of eyes on the UFC, on the on the women's division. And so it had to fall where it fell. So Joanna Champion, number 6.
Well, there you have it. Let's see. Our lists are pretty close, which I'm impressed by. And for the folks at home, there has been zero back and forth about our lists. We have all made our lists separately, and this is the first time we're all hearing each other's lists. Okay, for me at number 10, I think, Mark, you mentioned something like this, like my 9, 10 spots and some of my honorable mentions were very tight for me. We're very close. Yeah. inching onto my top 10 list in the number 10 spot is Miesha Tate for me. She has a lot of gold that people might not realize. She has championship belts in 2 other promotions other than UFC, one called FCF and also Strikeforce. She was a Strikeforce champ. She is 19-9 as a pro, a 68% finish rate. Excuse me, a 58% finish rate. She's been in a bunch of title fights. She's 4-3 in title fights, but she's only defended a belt once, and that was in the FCF promotion. Her biggest win was obviously the one over Holly Holm that got her the UFC strap. She's lost to Ronda twice. She got smashed by Nunes bad. I'm just going to echo things that you guys have already said about her in terms of, I think she scored still a lot of points for me, not just for eventually sticking around enough to win some gold. And in a fight that was the fight was a comeback fight in and of itself. And a great moment for Miesha's career. But Miesha scores trailblazery points for me in terms of being one of the early stars in women's MMA and kind of trailblazing that path for other women to come after her. So she gets onto my list in the number 10 spot. In my number 9 spot, I have Carla Cookie Monster Esparza. I mean, she has a hell of a record. She's 19-7. A higher finish rate than you might think. She has a 42% finish rate. That's mostly because she used her dominant grappling to get a lot of finishes earlier in her career. If you look on sort of the back 9 of her record, she hasn't been finishing anybody lately. She has been in 5 title fights. She's 3-2 in title fights. She has never defended a belt, which is something that has kept her low on my list. She does have 2 wins over Rose Namajunas. She has lost to Joanna. She lost bad to Zhang. But, hey, look, she has touched UFC gold twice with years in between, so she certainly deserves credit for sticking around, for toughing it out, for making it back to a title fight and winning. But for me, where other people on my list have scored a lot of points in the eye test, Esparza loses points for me in the eye test because she has never, ever fought with a style that impresses. She has never fought with a style that leaves me feeling like, man, I can't wait to watch Carla Esparza fight again. I hate to say that. It sounds mean. She seems awesome. But and she's on my fucking top 10 list. She's in my number 9. So like I have to defend against her. She can kill me with her fists.
You know what we're going to have to do at the end of this? We are going to have to average out our lists and see what our collective top 10 would shake out to be.
Okay. Nice.
Well, good luck with that math.
Okay, my number 8 is Holly Holm. Holly Holm. Nothing to say about her boxing career and kickboxing career before she got into MMA. But she has had a hell of a career so far. I think I think probably Mark alluded to this in terms of her career also kind of like Miesha's is really defined by a single fight of obviously her win over Ronda. Look, sometimes a single moment or a single knockout can establish a fighter's stardom. And this is a case where a single performance kind of cemented her legacy for the rest of her career. For what that fight was, the spot that it was, the moment that it was against the opponent that she was against in the Ronda, that was the Ronda going into that fight. Ronda was the juggernaut going into that fight. That was one of the greatest performances of all time. So, unfortunately, what makes Holm lose points for me in this debate is that she then immediately lost the belt in the next fight to Miesha Tate. And after that, her initial 10-0 run as a pro, she has now gone 4-6 in her last 10 fights. Tossing in 2 more title fights, both losses against JDR and against Cyborg. But Holly Holm still gains a lot of points overall in her career. She's always been one who brings the fight, and she's a consummate professional. So she's my number 8. My number 7, here we go. There's a lot of similarities now. My number 7 is Zhang Weili. Zhang Weili, a newer entrant to sort of the picture of female greats because, she's only been in the UFC since 2018. She entered the UFC. She's gone 7-2 in the UFC overall as a pro. She's 23-3 as a pro with an 83% finish rate. I mean, she's an absolute beast. She's beaten Carla Esparza, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and Jessica Andrade. She has lost to Rose twice. One of those fights was very closely contested. But look, Zhang very well may attain a much, much higher spot on this list when it's all said and done. But at this point, this list is not ranking potential greatness. That being said, she certainly scores a lot of points for my eye test alone. I mean, she fights and she displays excellence every time she steps into the cage. So that's why she is already on my number 7 spot. And my number 6 spot is Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She is my first person on my top 10 who is an inactive fighter. She's now retired. She went 16-5 as a pro. That is a 76% win rate with a 31% finish rate. She gained the UFC Strawweight Championship, and she put together one of the legendary runs in all of MMA. Not just women's side, but all of MMA. And I think Omar alluded to this, but man, she went, let's see. She went 14-0 in her first 14 pro fights, including this legendary strawweight title run, and during which time she was one of the bright spots in the entire sport. I think, Omar, you said something like she was almost like the Conor McGregor of women's MMA. And I couldn't agree more, man. She had the whole Boogie Woman persona going. She defended her belt 5 times, which felt like she defended it 14 times. And she's been back in the title picture since she lost the belt. Overall, in title fights, she is 6-4. So she has a winning record in title fights, and she's just one of the greats. Okay, so now we have all of our 10 through 6.
Very interesting.
Very, very interesting. Let's see. So Omar said Home, Conan, Tate, Wei Li, and Joanna. Mark said Esparza, Andrade, Wei Li, Joanna, and Rose. And I said Misha, Carla, Home, Wei Li, and Joanna.
So what we have learned here is that I know what both of your top 5 is. You guys don't know what mine is. Since I already have Rose at number 6.
This is true.
I find it interesting that we all put Rose over Joanna. I know she beat her twice, but I wasn't sure if we were all going to do that.
I mean, you can't not, especially with the way that she knocked her the fuck out the first time. And then the second fight was close, but like she clearly won that fight.
Yeah, I just in my head, I guess, when I think of like who's the greatest, I think because of Joanna's crazy run that we're just describing, my brain reaches for her before it reaches for Rose.
Sure.
But then when I really had to make a list, I was like, well, I can't do that. So yeah,
it was very close for me, and I mean I'm already tipping my hat here, so I guess I'll go. Let me just go first then.
You're gonna go straight through?
I'll go straight in to my top 5 here. Okay. So at my number 5 spot, I have Rose Namajunas. And just like you're talking about, her and Joanna's my number 6, and they're right now, and I pretty much got to a point where I'm shuffling names around and trying to figure out my ranking. And I had them right next to each other, and I might have had Joanna above Rose. And I'm like, if they are right next to each other, then I just have to give the edge to Rose. I don't know, because in other points, I didn't do that because it's not like we're comparing current rankings.
Yeah.
Because we are comparing overall greatness. But, I mean, razor close. I'm giving the edge to Rose. I mean, she is, one of the darlings of the UFC and has been so since she won the hearts of many fans in her run on Tough. And also, one of the greatest Rose moments has not been a Rose alone moment, but has been Daniel Cormier's legendary call, Thug Rose! Thug Rose! It's not like he gave her the nickname. That was already her nickname, but just his styling of it. Who did she beat? Was that when she knocked out Joanna?
That was
I think
Joanna.
it was when she
knocked out Zhang?
No, yeah, you're right. No, it wasn't.
it was Joanna.
When she knocked out Wei Li?
No, I don't.
It was Joanna?
If anybody who's listening or watching
you know-
right now on YouTube who knows with certainty, drop us a comment down below.
No, because that was the last. That was just the last fight. That's been a thing for a minute. It had to have been.
Joanna.
Doug Rose. Man, oh man.
Yeah, it's Joanna.
Okay. So yeah, Joanna is my number 6 and Rose is my number 5.
Yeah.
Keep going.
She's a 2-time strawweight champ. She beat Joanna twice. She beat Zhang twice, and she's gone 1-1 against Andrade. She has lost to Esparza twice. So yeah, she's my number 5. Okay, my number 4 is Ronda Rousey. What is there to say about Ronda, man, that hasn't already been said? My goodness. 12-2 on her career. That's an 86% win rate with a 100% finish rate. That is right. In all 12 of Ronda Rousey's professional MMA bouts, she finished all 12 of her opponents in fights that she won. She is the only woman on this list who can boast a 100% finish rate in her wins. She, of course, was the inaugural UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion. I don't think she won it. I think they just gave it to her from Strikeforce.
No, she won it. She fought Liz for it.
So it was sort of like a created vacant belt.
Yeah.
She came in though as the champion.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think she defended it immediately.
They
kinda gave it to her.
made. I remember
because
that
they
being a
bought
whole
Strikeforce?
thing.
What about that?
Is that because they bought
He had a whole
Strikeforce?
press conference and everything.
Kind of similar to Jose Aldo.
I think so. Yeah, he came in. She came in as the champion.
You're right.
Thank you. Okay, why is Ronda not higher on my list? Well, first of all, of other names of greats, she has only beaten one person, whose name is Miesha Tate. She beat Miesha twice in her career, once in Strikeforce and once in the UFC. She has not beaten anybody else among the greats, so that loses points for her right there. She lost bad to Holly Holm, and she lost really bad to Amanda Nunes. So she loses points there. And obviously, I mean, I'm not really going to, I don't know how many points she gets detracted for sort of the way she exited the sport. I mean, she took those back-to-back losses, and then she just kind of bowed out of the sport. She was quiet for a long time, and then she went to the WWE and has been wrestling. But in terms of her run, I mean, here's the thing, is that the Ronda Rousey run, more so than Gina Carano, more so than anybody, more so than Joanna, Ronda Rousey catapulted women's MMA to what it is today. Case closed. And for that alone, gains her a ton of points in this debate. Never mind the run that she went on, which was an amazing run in and of itself. She was so dominant. So for that reason, she is my number 4. That being said, my number 3 is Chris Cyborg. I mean, what a beast. You want to talk about dominance? Chris Cyborg on her career, and I believe she's still active. Correct me if I'm wrong. She's 26-2 as a professional. I forgot to pull up her finish rate, but I'm sure it's absolutely absurd.
It's quite high.
Chris Cyborg, if you don't know, Chris Cyborg has a lot of gold. She was only 81% finish rate.
Yes.
She was in and out of the UFC relatively quickly. Kind of had a tumultuous relationship with UFC. But she won the UFC Featherweight Championship. She also was the inaugural Strikeforce Women's Featherweight Championship. She also was the inaugural Invicta Women's Featherweight Champion. And she's also now the Bellator Women's Featherweight Champion. I mean, this woman has so many belts on her wall at home. Notable win among people on this list. She's beaten Holly Holm. Nobody else. But again, the 4 belts in 4 different organizations, the utter dominance. She's only ever lost twice. She is one of the scariest individuals I've ever watched in a cage fighting. She lost her very first pro fight and then didn't lose a fight for 13 years, which is still a lot of years, but not as many as 15. Chris Cyborg, my number 3. My number 2, Valentina the Bullet Shevchenko. Personally, probably my favorite fighter on this list. Y'all know the crush that I have on Valentina. 23-3 as a pro, so just as dominant as just about anybody. 65% finish rate. She is the current reigning UFC Women's Flyweight Champion. She is 8-1 in championship fights. Oh, also, let me just backtrack real quick. Chris Cyborg is 15-1 in championship fights across her pro career. Back to Valentina. Valentina, 8-1 in title fights. She has 7 title defenses in this current reign. I mean, she's putting together, we're in it right now, one of the most dominant and amazing, legendary title reigns in women's MMA ever. And it's still going. She has beat Holly Holm. She subbed Juliana Pena. She TKO'd Jessica Andrade. She beat Joanna. Detraction, she lost to Nunes twice. But look, she's only lost to 2 women. And she's in, like I said, she's in the middle of a legendary run. She's cleaning out the women's flyweight division in the UFC. So for that reason, she's all the way up to number 2, but she did not top my list. It was close, man. It's fucking close. But right now, as it stands right now, my number 1 is Amanda Nunes. 22-5, 2-division champ in the UFC, women's bantam, women's featherweight. She's beaten Valentina twice. And one of those fights was very close. I think they were both pretty close, but I think one of them was razor close. And many people thought that Valentina won. But in the record books, Amanda has the bragging rights to beating Valentina on 2 occasions. They may fight again. We'll see. She obviously completely shut the door on Ronda's career. She also knocked out Chris Cyborg, one of the most exciting bouts we've ever seen. She also knocked out Holly Holm. She also beat the shit out of Miesha Tate. That was hard to watch, to be honest. I think that was at UFC 200. The first half of Amanda Nunes' career, this is where she differs a little bit. She has 5 losses. The first half of her pro career is kind of speckled with losses. 3 times she got finished. But then, a couple years later, she developed into something that we have not seen before in women's MMA. I mean, she unlocked another level, and she put together a truly legendary run, finishing nearly all of her opponents in style. She finished Sarah McMahon. She beat Valentina. She finished Miesha. She finished Ronda. She beat Valentina a second time. She finished Pennington. She finished Cyborg. She finished Holly Holm. She beat GDR. She beat Spencer. She beat Megan Anderson. She lost to Pena and then immediately beat Pena in dominant fashion to get it right back. So, in terms of like one run of dominance, that for me puts Nunes at the top of the heap right now. It still could change. It could be Valentina. It might end up being Wei Li. We'll see. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Very nice list.
Oh,
Great points all around. I enjoyed it.
I am going to say my list from 5 to 1 is exactly the same as Mike's.
Really?
So, yeah. So I'm not going to go through the whole rigmarole of it.
So you have Rose at number 5, Ronda at 4.
I have Rose at number 5, Ronda at number 4, Chris Cyborg at number 3, Valentina at number 2, and Amanda at number 1. I couldn't put Amanda at number 2. I wanted to put Valentina at number 1 because I prefer Valentina. But the facts are what they are. She's like, if they never fought, I feel like I could make the argument a little bit better. But they have, and she's lost, so I can't.
Okay, Mark at number 5.
So that's it, Omar? You don't want to say anything about your take on any of them?
I mean, a lot of it was that take. I mean,
right.
Rose Namajunas and the Joanna Champion and the Zhang Wei Li, they're all so fluid for me just because Joanna Rose and Wei Li are still fighting, right? Joanna had made such a large mark in the MMA world that it's hard to remove her from that place. But there's still room for that to shift around. Ronda Rousey's another one whose impact was too great. I mean, if you talk about a run, there was literally points where they were making cartoons out of her walking around with people's arms everywhere. because not only was she finishing people, she was finishing them all by armbar.
Yes.
Like, she would look you in the face, told you what she was going to do, and did it, and you couldn't stop her. It wasn't until she got to the UFC she started doing other crazy shit and knocking people out and all this other nonsense. And I think she started feeling herself a little too much with that and got a little too overconfident
In her hands.
and fought somebody who actually had hands.
She forgot about the head movement.
I don't think she ever knew about the head movement.
I think also for Ronda became such a massive star relatively quickly. Like, it was quick. Like, over the course of like a couple years, her life completely changed. And in looking back on it, personally, like, I think her body changed. You can see, like, I look and doing this research, seeing images of Ronda in Strikeforce. Holy shit! Ronda Rousey was a fucking animal. She was jacked.
I think it was just, I honestly think it was the level of competition, because the reality was Ronda never had hands, but she never needed them.
No, he's talking about physically,
I think
appearance-wise.
But what do
She
you
was
mean?
just
Like,
doing
she was
more and
always
more
fucking
press,
jacked.
More and more media. I think she kind of lost her conditioning more and more as her career went on. Because I think she was in more movies and doing more press and more media. When she was in Strikeforce and just fighting, she was a fucking monster.
Maybe. She was always a big girl to me. She always seemed fucking thick as hell. But regardless, she was taking arms home left and right. I don't really care about how she left the sport, because MMA fans are dicks anyway, so I don't really think she owed anything to anybody. So I don't really care about that. I will say her leaving after 2 fights doesn't really affect the impact that she had for me.
True.
I mean, she had a legendary run. She took home tons and tons of gold. And then she hit like a new generation of fighter.
Yes.
Holly Holm had come from a different background, and Holly Holm had one job in that fight, and it could have gone left for Holly Holm too. I mean, let's be real. But Holly Holm had one job in that fight, and it was to make sure Ronda Rousey didn't fucking put hands on her.
Here's the difference. Sorry, keep going. Finish.
Go ahead.
A real marker that you have crossed over to become not just a star within your sport, but a megastar and a cultural icon is when little kids dress up as you for Halloween. When little girls dress up as Ronda Rousey, and the only other person I can think of is Conor McGregor. But nobody else in the sport not Fedor, not John Jones, not Daniel Cormier, not GSP, not Anderson.
Let's not forget Raul Rosas Jr. dressed up as what's his name? Oh, Robbie Lawler for his birthday one year. Apparently,
Respect.
had a whole Robbie Lawler cake and the whole deal. So your man was really into Robbie Lawler when he was younger. So
Did
Robbie Lawler's on the
make
list
it
of those who
your-
made it.
Into Mark's honorable mentions. Oh, wait a second. We're doing women. Holy shit.
Wow.
For a moment, I was the thought
drunk?
just crossed my head. I was like, he deserves some.
No more
honorable
whiskey
mention
for
points.
you.
No more whiskey for me. Oh my god.
Wow. All right. Omar, you want to say anything about your other ones?
Yeah, so Chris Cyborg needs to be on this list because her spot in this sport, I think, is you can't really dispute it. She's been around. She's fucking killed everybody that she's basically come into contact with. And her issues with the UFC, in my opinion, although she lost to Amanda Nunes and lost badly, like it wasn't even competitive, I don't think should be held against her because they took a lot of time out of her career, which I thought was pretty fucked up. They didn't really give her a division to really work with. They didn't give her any women to really fight. And they kind of dicked her around for like 2 years, or I think it was 2 years. And I don't think that should be really held against her, especially because after she left, she's continuously killing girls still now to this day. Chris Cyborg's a beast, man. Chris Cyborg's a beast, and it can't be denied. I think the only 2 people now on this list, like Mike has, Valentina and Amanda, are 2 people that I would argue are just better than Chris Cyborg. Amanda's proven it. Valentina is not in that weight class, so she won't. They'll never fight, I think, at this point. But even at 135, I don't think that'll ever happen. So I just think Valentina is an overall elite, fantastic, unmatched martial artist. Amanda Nunes has the 2 Ws, but again, we can dispute that. Those 2 specific fights, we can still dispute whether Valentina should have walked away with that win, whether they should have been 5-round fights in some of those cases, and so on and so forth. But regardless, Valentina gets my number 2 spot. She's a beast. She's the killer. She's the queen of 125. She has been, still is. Amanda had to take that belt away and has kept it at 135. She lost to Juliana Pena, but the result of the second fight, I think, far outweighed what is now seemingly an outlier in the first fight, which is, I think, more so why we need that third fight more than ever. But Amanda, again, has done so much damage in those divisions, both at 135 and 145. It's hard not to give her the number 1 spot.
I will say this about Chris Cyborg. I would have been very interested to see her rematch Amanda. To see,
1,000%.
Oh, yeah. Because, I mean, that was just a fucking firestorm. I would love to see her rematch and maybe come in with a slightly different approach.
1,000%. When she left the UFC, that was my first thought. I was like, fuck, we're never going to get this rematch, and I wanted it so bad. Just because Cyborg did not fight a smart fight, and I would love to have seen her approach a second time.
All right, Mark, give us your top 5.
All right. So, yeah. So where I've been so far was Esparza, Andrade, Whaley, Joanna, and Rose. So my kind of outlier that snuck into my top 5 was my nod to the past, which was Megumi Fuji. She is women's Fedor. Like, she has that record like Fedor had, where it's just like, oh my God, she never lost a fight. Like, her career spanned from 2004 to 2013, so 10-year career. And yes, of course, you could bring up the level of competition in the same way that I mentioned with Marlis Kunin, that maybe it was not quite at the level it was at a few years after that. But I think Fuji's career is so good and so dominant that it doesn't matter. She was 26-3 overall. At one point, she was 22-0 over a 6-year career before finally losing a split decision to Zoila Frausto. She then won a few more before ultimately dropping 2 controversial split decisions to Jessica Aguilar, who's another woman who was very good, and calling it a career. But A, 22-0 over 6 years. B, 20 finishes in 26 wins, 19 of them by submission. And C, and this is the main thing for me of why she ended up this high on my list, no one ever truly got the better of her. In 29 fights, she lost 3 times, and all 3 were by controversial split decisions. So you could argue in 29 fights, no one was ever better than her. And that's an insane level of dominance. And it's honestly a higher level of dominance than really any other girl we're discussing tonight had. Everyone else on this list has been clearly beat at some point in time.
Yeah.
So I had to get her high on this list, and she slips in as my number 5. Next one. Obviously, I have the same top 4 as you guys in terms of the names. I have slight difference in ranking. I debated this for a while.
Okay.
I flip-flopped these like every time I thought about it. My number 4 is Chris Cyborg. When I think about it tomorrow, I might flip it again.
Yeah.
Chris is another one with an insane record. She's 26-2. And like Mike said, her pro debut was a loss. So since that time, she's 26-1, with the only loss being to the GOAT, Amanda Nunes. She has 21 finishes in 26 fights, but it's at featherweight. And that's why she's number 4 for me. We know that the skill level at 145 is just not the same as it is in the lower weight classes. We've seen it with Amanda Nunes and the people that she has had to defend that belt against. We've even seen it in Bellator with who Cyborg is defending the belt against. Yes, Cyborg has beat some great fighters like Marlis Kunin and Holly Holm, but they're not 145ers. They're smaller women that tried to fight her. The only real, quality all-timer at her own weight class that she beat is Julia Budd. And outside of that, as unreal as she is, as dominant as she is, that was kind of my X factor that had me land her at 4. You want to tell me you think she should be 1? I can't fucking hate on you. She's that good. For me, the level of competition at that weight class versus the lower weight classes had her land at 4. And the one I was debating her with, flip-flopping, is Ronda Rousey.
Yeah.
She is my number 3. So I'll say quickly before I get to her, I love that we all have Valentina at 2. I thought you would both have her at 4. I really did.
Oh, funny.
Oh no, dude! I was trying to put her at 1. Kidding me?
I love seeing that. I don't know. I just thought she'd be behind Nunez and Cyborg and Rousey. I love seeing her that high.
Yeah.
But my number 3 is Ronda Rousey. In a way, it feels wrong ranking her ahead of Cyborg because I do think Cyborg would have wrecked her if they ever fought. But again, there's weight classes for a reason, and we can only go off resumes, and I think Ronda's is slightly stronger. So just to rattle off some names quickly, Mike kind of made this point, but Ronda Rousey beat Sarah D'Alelio, who was good, Julia Budd, who was arguably Cyborg's best win in her whole career, Miesha Tate, Sarah Kaufman, Liz Carmouche, Miesha Tate again, Sarah McMahon, Alexis Davis, Kat Zingano, and the one random, which is Betchy Correia. And you know what she did in all 12 of those fights? Finished. And do you know what she did in 11 out of those 12 finishes? Finished in the first round.
No, that's who.
It was a stretch of dominance unlike anything we've ever seen in women's MMA. I mean, her fights were over in minutes. No one could touch her. Girls were broken before they even stepped into the cage. Like, she was just invincible for a while there. And, of course, that's until she wasn't. And she got KO'd by Holly Holm and then returned for an ill-fated ass-whipping at the hands of Amanda Nunez. But everything before that was enough for number 3 in my eyes. I just felt the resume was stronger than what Cyborg, kind of through no fault of her own, is able to have on her resume fighting at the weight class that she's fighting at. Number 2, the unanimous number 2 amongst us, Valentina Shevchenko. Like I said, in my head when I started this, I was like, oh, she's probably number 4. And then when I started really looking at it, I was like, no, she's not. She's number 2. And she is. She has a record of 23-3. She has 15 finishes in 23 fights. She already has 8 title wins, despite her division only having existed for her last 8 fights. So God knows how many more she would have had if that wasn't the case. And most importantly for me, for her, it was her losses. She's lost 3 times in her whole career. The first one was a short notice fight that she took after 4 years out of MMA against Liz Carmouche. She was winning the fight handily, and an upkick cut her eye, and they had to stop the fight. So that's not even really a loss. The next one was against Amanda Nunez, a girl who is at least one weight class larger than her, and who obviously you know is going to be number 1 on my list and was on both of yours. And that was a decision loss in only Valentina's second UFC fight. And the third one, again, was Amanda in a split that many people scored for Valentina, including myself. So 23-3 is really more like 23-2 without the Liz loss, and both losses are to the GOAT, and one of them might have been a win over the GOAT. So I can't put Valentina any lower than 2, and like I said, I'm glad to see neither of you guys did either. But, I mean, she's beat a string of women. She beat Kaufman, Holm, she finished Juliana Pena, beat Joanna, finished Jessica I, had a rematch with Liz Carmouche where she was able to avenge that loss by cut, finished Chukagian, beat Maya, finished Andrade, finished Lauren Murphy, now she just beat Tyler Santos. The resume it stacks up against anyone other than, I guess, the number 1 here. So Valentina is my number 2 all time, and it could change. You never know how the rest of these careers go. But yeah, number 1, it's kind of the gimme of the list in a way.
Yep.
Like we were all kind of touching on. You could make arguments if you want. It's very hard not to put Amanda Nunez at number 1. She's 22-5, 17 finishes. What Mike pointed out is, an interesting point that I wanted to make as well, which is that she does have some questionable losses early in her career. She was TKO'd by Alexa Davis. She lost to Sarah DeLelio. She was TKO'd by Kat Zingano. Recently, even the Pena submission loss didn't look great. But it's the run between the Zingano loss and the Pena loss that has her at number one. That's where she kind of changed into who she was as a fighter. That was her prime. And she beat Valentina twice. She submitted Misha. She knocked out Ronda. She knocked out Cyborg. She knocked out Holm, and plenty of other women in that stretch as well. Like you can't not put her at one. She became a 2-weight champion. She's defended both belts, which no one fucking does when they become a 2-weight champ. She has 10 title fight victories. And when it comes down to it, if you're 4-0 against the girls I just ranked 2, 3, and 4, I certainly can't rank you any lower than 1. So Amanda Nunes, the women's GOAT.
Woo!
Well done, boys. Well done.
That was fun.
I liked it. Everyone did their work there. It was a solid list.
Yeah, man.
I enjoyed it.
Let's see. Nunes and Shevchenko both have 7 title defenses. Ronda also has 7 title defenses.
No, wait. Amanda's got to have more than 7 because she
No.
has 10 title wins, unless I fucked up my count.
It's just because...
Oh, because the win backs and...
Yeah,
sorry, yes.
win backs. In terms of defending belts. I made a whole category of like how many title defenses that they've had. Let's see.
You know what I did forget?
Tell me.
I was under the impression, I thought I had remembered Valentina coming in as the flyweight champion when they first opened up the division. But they did tough. And that was the whole Nico Montano thing. And they stripped her of the belt when she fucking never made weight, never did anything.
Yeah.
And then they gave it to Valentina and Joanna, or the winner of Valentina, Joanna.
Yep.
And then it just went from there.
Yep.
It felt like one of those things where they were like, Valentina has it.
Wait, they gave the belt to Nico first?
Well, she
Nico
won.
was the
She won
champ.
tough.
So that tough season was to crown the champ as an intro to the new division.
Yeah. They brought
And
in
Nico
basically
never
like,
made
they
it to
brought
a
in
fight.
everybody from Invicta basically at 125.
Yeah.
And basically just had a tough with it. And Nico was literally the dark horse of the entire show. Then ended up winning. And then fucked her whole career up.
And it was
like
supposed
overnight.
to be, if I'm remembering right, it was supposed to be her and Valentina. Like Valentina was supposed to be getting the shot.
Right.
And Nico just had so many issues that they were like, all right, see you later. And it became Joanna moving up to try to step in.
What an absolute waste.
Yeah.
I expected a lot more from that girl.
Another thing of note, Zhang Weili has the exact same record as Valentina Shevchenko. They are both 23-3, which is interesting to me.
That'd be some fucking fight.
Yeah, man.
See, that's what I mean about how people can move on this list. Like, say that fight happens and Whaley wins.
Oh, my God.
Where does Whaley go on this
Oh,
list?
skyrocket.
Like, yeah,
100%.
yeah.
Oh, man.
But yeah, this was fun. This was very fun. So we have the top 4 was not the order, but the top 4 people were unanimous, which makes
That's
sense.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only flip flop was me having Rousey over Cyborg and you guys having Cyborg over Rousey. Did you guys debate that? Or you feel clear about Cyborg over her?
Over Rousey?
Yeah,
It was I went back and forth a lot.
you did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I did too.
I
That
went
was
back
tough.
and forth about
I-
Cyborg and Rousey, Rosen and Joanna.
Yep.
I went back and forth a bit about Zhang. And then sort
Yep.
of my bottom of the list / my honorables was all sort of like a jumble.
Yeah. I had to figure out where I wanted to put Fuji. But I felt like I went with 5 just because Weili, Joanna, Rose had kind of like Weili had the losses to Rose. Joanna had the losses to both of them. Rose, even though she beat those, she had these losses to like Esparza and some other ones. So I felt like I would put her in above that trio. Obviously, I wasn't cracking the top 4, but
I wish Fuji had won any gold somewhere. I do.
It's tough.
I mean,
man.
how was she 22 and
It's so
over 6
interesting.
years and didn't win a title? Did they just
Because
not have
the-
titles? I
I
heard you
guess
say that
not.
earlier, and I was like, are we sure?
Yeah, I guess either they weren't recorded or they didn't have titles in the organization she was with, and then the one time she was supposed to get that Bellator title, she had won that tournament, and then she got a split decision loss and didn't get the title. Had she won that fight, she would have been in my top 10 for sure.
Right. Yeah. No, I know that. Bellator one. Yeah.
Mark, rattle off your honorables again.
My honorables were
Home.
so like if I had to go from 11, I think my order would have been Conan, Kaufman, Tate, Home.
Okay. That's fine. I'm recording for posterity. And Omar, yours were Carano, Andrade.
Mm-hmm.
And someone else. He had 3.
Two others.
Or no, he had 4, I think.
Esparza and Fuji.
Right. Yeah, we all had very similar lists, man. Very similar lists.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine and Mark's were like removed by one spot in some senses. Like
My outlier was Marlos Kunin, and
Right.
Mark's was Megumi Fuji.
And was I the only one with Andrade cracking my 10? Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like you had Esparza 11, I had her. No, you had Esparza 10, I had her 9.
Yeah.
You had
Yeah.
Weili 8, I had Weili 7. You had Ioana 7, I had Ioana 6. You had Rose 6, I had Rose 5. So it was like very similar.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I want to try to average these out later and make a show. In the comments of this, I'll put all 3 of ours and then what the average show ranking would be.